For me.
For you.
Yeah.
Okay. Rolling.
Okay, it is March 1st, 2011. We are in Honolulu, Hawaii. Lisa Sueki is on camera, Barbara Watanabe is on catalog, and Richard is getting to chat with Mr. Watanabe. First of all, thank you for inviting us to your home to do this.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. If you would just say your name and when and where you were born.
Well, my name is Saburo Watanabe. I was born in the year 1920. Beyond that, I've been around pretty much over the between Oahu and the Big Island and Maui. So those are my, three focal locations.
But you were born in Honolulu?
No, I was born, that's a fun part about it. I was born on the Big Island.
Oh, the Big Island.
Yes. And actually, when people say, where were you born? And I tell them where I was born, the Big Islanders don't know locale either, because it was for them history too. And the place is called Kaiviki.
And is your birthday coming up soon?
My
What-
birthday?
Yeah.
Yes.
When is the
It
month
was,
and day?
26th of January.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very
You're
good.
cutting it pretty close.
Yeah, I am. Let's see. Now, I'm going to kind of jump in here
Yes.
because I heard a really cool story and I
Yes.
wanted to ask you about it. And the story centers on a song called Pono'i.
Hawaii Pono'i.
What is Hawaii Pono'i?
That's the Hawaii national anthem. Hawaii Pono'i.
Now, when you were in service,
Yes,
I heard a very interesting story
yes.
about that song and you.
Well, that's been retold in many times, but yes, it's an interesting story. When you come down to stories, it's when the commander of the 100th Battalion came in one day, and he said the 442nd band was just formed, and the CEO of the 442nd had, prior to the formation of this band, asked me to come in and be interviewed. So, being a rookie, GI rookie, you kind of wonder what's going on, And so I said, yes, sir. And this Colonel Turner of the 100th came over and asked me, he says, well, that's another story that is a little bit offshoot of, most stories that go as they go. The person who actually headed that band was Nisei boy. He was asked to form the group because he was the only musician, person who was by rank and all, was qualified to form this band, and he did. So Colonel Turner jumped into this situation and he explained to this Nisei boy, I should call him young man because he was a young man, what Colonel Turner was requesting. Well, you know, Hawaii Pono'i to him meant nothing, okay, because it's a Hawaii state anthem. And so he kind of, the mainland boy looked around and said, do any of you know what they're talking about? So I said, oh, yeah, I mean, it happens to be our Hawaii state anthem. And he says, oh. So he turned to the colonel and said, here's a person who knows something about this anthem that you're looking for. So then we kind of bantered around a little bit, and he said, you know, at that time, my rank was still a private, okay? So he said, Private, can you help the colonel out here? And I said, yes, sir. What he wants is this and that, and explained to him the situation. So by the time we got through, the situation has been retold many times already, but I'll mention it again. We settled on the situation that the 100th Battalion was going to be shipped overseas. Okay, that's point number one. And they were going to have their what they call a parade, a review, before they were going to be shipped over. And the colonel wanted a rendition of Hawaii Pono'i at this last review of the 100th Battalion before they were shipped overseas. So this was went on fine, and I told the colonel, yeah, I mean, I can do that, but he says, you know, I'm not giving you much time, soldier, you know. And I said, well, you name the time. He kind of looked at me and he said, well, actually, I need it immediately. I said, what do you mean immediately? He says, maybe like, you know, apologetically, he looked at me and said, well, maybe, let's say, maybe about, then he kind of, you know, and really apologetically looked at me and said, well, do you think we can have it by the parade, which is going to happen tomorrow? You know. So I looked at him and I said, yeah, I mean, it's possible, you know. So he says, well, it's just, so I don't remember the crack he made, but he made a crack for saying that, well, you know, in the Army, nothing is impossible, soldier, in that sense, you know. So we kind of laughed over that. And he said, so I got the boys in the band busy giving me a hand because we had to write out parts, right? Even if for a small band, we needed parts. So, and all different, you know, instrumentation. And we did that. And everybody, you know, when the 100 had this review, of course, we all recall when Hawaii Pono'i was played, there really wasn't dry-eyed, soldier information, and I kind of laugh over it, but just like the movies, just like the movies. Everybody, really teary-eyed and all that, and everything went on fine.
How long did it take you and the band members to write down the parts?
Well, we spent the most of the evening getting it down on paper. And some of those was a pretty experienced musician, so it was no problem at all getting it down on paper. So and the colonel was very appreciative of the moment, and he thanked the boys for giving it the old go for broke thing. So yeah, that went on very nicely.
Now, I'm a Hawai'i, originally from the East Coast,
Yes.
on the mainland.
Right.
So I don't know Pono'i.
Yes.
What is important that I should know about that song?
Well, everybody in Hawaii knows what Hawaii Pono'i is. I mean, it's a state today. The state has adopted it as its state anthem.
What does it talk about? What is the idea?
Actually, it's a short piece of music that the monarchy used to call their own, and they use this anytime they had one of these royal gatherings and things like that, it's just like equivalent to say any mainland state would have its own state anthem, something like that. So when you say what should a mainlander know about us, Hawaii Pono'i, that's what it is. Expressing Hawaiian in the Hawaiian language. Okay, so
What does Pono mean?
Pono.
Yeah.
Well, Hawaii Pono. When you really translate that word Pono, today they say Pono. Pono means like, oh, everything's fine.
Now, in order that story, it's a great story, and about being able to do that for the 100th Battalion, who was ready to go off to fight war. So, from that point of view, I love that story. Great story.
Yes.
But the story also tells me that in order for you to complete the writing of the music and get the band ready to play, you had to know a great deal about music, and you had to be very good with music.
Well, you see, I have my background is music.
When did you start?
Instrumental music, and that's my field. So it was right in my alley when it came down to working with using the music for this kind of occasion. I mean, it was like bread and butter in a way. So no big deal, in other words, Yeah.
When did you start to become interested in music?
When? Oh, that goes back to my high school days and my growing up days right here. In fact, this Washington Intermediate School, which is right behind us, which way? Anyway, it's the intermediate school that I went to. And when you say, when did I become interested in it, goes even further back to my elementary school days, because I was raised at Kuhio Beach, you know. And actually, I grew up on Kuhio Beach, and that is all part of my, you know.
Is there a particular person or event that where you heard the music, or someone taught you or sang to you? Can you go back that far?
When I went to high school here, especially there was what I would call a musician who was a high school band teacher. And he was not only the high school band teacher, but he was also the organist at Central Union Church. He was a choral director and all that kind of business, you know. You name the works, he had a very deep interest in all the phases of music. And this is a kind of, you might say, tutorage I grew up on. So
Who was that?
Person by the name of Paul Sanders, Sanders, and he actually grew up in Wisconsin. And where I later on, matriculated to eventually, and grew up, developed my skills in Wisconsin.
All these years, you have dedicated your life to music.
Yes.
And you're very renowned and respected. You have contributed to Hawaii in a most unique and wonderful way. Mm-hmm. What do you love about music? What is it about music? Your whole life.
Now, when you ask a musician what is it about music that you love, you're saying to a cat, what is it about milk that you love so much? You know, that's about the size of it.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Do you have a favorite piece of music, or a couple that you love?
I tell you, when you talk about favorite music, no. The extent of favoritism extends as far as the music stretches. You know, it's far and wide. It's tall and shallow in a sense, from a perspective point of view. So, yeah. Well, in short, music has no bounds. Let's put it that way.
Now, what I find kind of interesting about you is there's this gentleman who made music his career and life, and has given that to many, many people, many generations, and they in turn give it to others. Mm-hmm. A part of that man's life, was spent in war.
Yes.
That sounds contradictory to my understanding of music,
right,
and my appreciation of music. Mm-hmm. What was your job in World War II? What did you do?
Well, when you say a specific job that I was assigned as an intelligence man, assigned to the British So I worked with the British in interrogating prisoners and all that kind of stuff. My specific field was called the order of battle. Now, you know, when you say, what has that got to do with all this? That's a question I asked at that time. But what really amounted to was that we got all the information that we could gather from the battlefield and put it in the so-called grinder, you know, to make it simpler. And what came out of it was that we could ascertain to a pretty close situation that, oh, the Japanese had so many troops here in this area, and they lost so many men and all that kind of business, you know. And we put them all together, and as I say, we put it in a grinder, and we found out actually how they operated, you know. So that part of it, if you see, I've never used the word, but I think I could honestly say that that part of it appealed to me because it's a sort of analysis situation, see, and you analyze all these things, and then you put your heads together and you work things out of this puzzle. So, yeah, it served its purpose in that sense.
Now, how did you get from Hawaii into the Army to being a detachment to the British? That's quite a path.
Yeah, it is quite a path. First of all, you know, I got my first assignment from the Department of Education here, and I was sent to the Big Island. That was my first assignment. And I got, from then on, it becomes a little bit complicated because I was, then Pearl Harbor came on, and while I was on the Big Island, my first assignment, and after that, I went over to Maui as my second assignment, okay? And my second assignment got me to volunteer for the 442nd. Yes. And from that situation, from the 442nd, of course, we went through the you know, basic training in Shelby. All the boys went through and all that. And from then I was sent to Camp Savage, which is in Minnesota, intelligence unit. And from there, eventually I landed in Burma, you know. And there's a little bit of in between there, but it's just a army term, passing through kind of situation, you know. So this is how we start differentiating between the 442, the 100, MIS, military intelligence service, and all that. We start differentiating all these units, so to speak, you know. So yeah, it was kind of a interesting situation, I would say. Yeah.
Now, had you spoken much Japanese? Did you know how to speak, read, or write Japanese prior to going into the Army?
Well, enough to use some of it, but our training, let's say, while we're in this situation, it was very intensive, and you know, we used to laugh because at Camp Savage in Minnesota, it was so bad that we would have our regular exams, right? And in order for the boys to be sure that they passed these exams, we're supposed to go to bed at the regular hour of, when lights out. Everybody should be in the cot, so to speak. And you hardly saw anybody in the cot because they were all out in the toilet. They just seated in the toilet seat, boning up for their exam, you know.
So that they were in Benjo, but they weren't.
That's right.
What were they doing again?
They were studying.
Were you one of them?
Oh, absolutely. Every one of us. I mean, we couldn't survive without sitting on the stool. You know?
So you make it through language school, and then they ship you overseas, and you eventually end up in Burma.
Right.
Were you part of a 1, 2, 5, or 10-man team?
My team was no. We were a group of boys that were sent as a team, but each team really consisted of 10 men. And out of the 10 men, then they would select a couple of men to make a 2-man team. And that's where we ended up, a lot of us. Yeah.
Now, I know that the U.S. was in Burma, too. We had Merle's Marauders, and we had other forces there. How'd you end up with the British, of all people?
Well, I ended up with the British because that's where they wanted me. Yeah, and the funny offshoot of this is that our intelligence unit was closely connected with the OSS, but at that time, nobody was supposed to know that there was such a thing as OSS, and that is Bill Donovan's group, you see, and a member of the team, Bill Donovan's group, was a gal from here. She was known as a journalist, and her name was Betty McDonald. But later on, of course, with the war situation and all, she her last name that she goes by today in her books and all is known as I lose track of her. Betty. Now, let me see.
It may come back to you later if you keep telling story.
Yeah.
So there's the OSS is starting, and they're actually active. And you're with Military Intelligence Service. You're with a 2-man team, and you're in Burma, and you're attached to the British, working with the British. How did the British treat you?
How did they treat me? Oh, they gave we got really good treatment from the British, because one is that we supplied them with a service that they really needed. You know, they needed somebody who could interpret all these data that was coming in, and could give that feedback so that it could be useful to them.
Now, did you actually interrogate the POWs?
Mm-hmm.
You actually interrogated them. How do you interrogate somebody? How do you get information from them? What technique did you use?
Well, depending on where you were sent and how you were sent, there are a lot of, it depends on the situation, because in my situation, I was sent on a two-man team to the British to do this specific job. And out of that, we worked with British intelligence, okay? And I worked in what is called the order of battle. And that's a very specific military assignment. When they say order of battle, you know exactly what they're talking about. So in the course of the order of battle, like I was just telling my wife the other day, you know, there's something that I kind of bothered me, because I don't think I talked, you know, in any of these interviews that we've had, the situation where I worked with the Japanese PWs, you know. All the other incidents of all the units were mentioned that they had Japanese PWs and all that, you know, Okinawa campaign and all that business and all. But I said, in my situation, the PWs that I worked with was very limited, because these are the PWs that furnished me information that I could use against them. And in my particular situation, it was very interesting, because this one PW that I happened to have, what they call intendance person. Now, intendance, you talk to a GI, what are you talking about, intendance, you know? Well, it's a very simple term. Is a officer who takes care of the books, you know. And this officer is a young fellow. He was the first Japanese PW officer that gave himself up voluntarily. Now, you know, people say, what are you talking about now, you know? I said, well, you know, that's the way it was thrown at me at that time, so I'm just telling you what's happened. And I told my wife that one thing that I remember about this office was just nice and tall. Another thing I remember about him is that at the end of our war, so to speak, he wrote me a very nice letter, you know, thanking me for being so kind to him and all that kind of stuff, you know. Very flowery in Japanese, you know, language, and enough to make anybody Chakatir, it's a very nice letter. And I told her that, gee, I wish I had kept that letter because it was one of those things that would have been wonderful to have, And but we said our goodbyes and went our ways. That's the war. That's war. So, yeah.
You remember his name by any chance?
Well, that's the odd thing about it is that I think I do and I think I don't situation, And
Sure.
I think his name was, his first name was Hiroshi, I think. And his, it could be Ota or something like that, but when I said, I'm vague about that, so I let it go by. And yeah.
So you were putting together the order of battle, which tells us which units came from where in Japan, how they trained, where they were sent all over, no matter what, who was in them, who died, who lived. I mean, it is the history of the units of the Japanese Army.
Absolutely. And the funny part about this history is this, that I find out later on that where we operated, the units that gave us this flow of information were units from the hometown province of Japan that ties back to my dad.
Which prefecture was that?
Fukushima.
Fukushima.
Yeah. And then, in Japanese history, you come across probably this white tiger corps, with young teenagers thought that their Lord had been subdued, and they all committed, harakiri and all that. See, so yeah. So when I look at some of these historical dramas that come on TV, I kind of look at that thing and say, "Gee, boy, there's a lot of history behind all this that I didn't know anything about," And later on, I asked my dad about all these things. He says, "Oh yeah, these things actually happened," Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you're working primarily with one Japanese officer, and you're putting together all this data.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of data.
Yes.
I'm talking reams and reams of data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your job, or backtrack, most Nisei linguist jobs were simply to get information and pass it on. You talked about yourself analyzing it. Was that part of your official job, or is that something you just started to do naturally?
No, it was part of the job,
Okay.
official job, and so and the other thing that I don't think you would know too much about, or whether the other units like the Koreans, they had their own intelligence units out there, and they were doing essentially the same thing that I was doing, but and feeding back that information back to their intelligence groups, So a lot of these things are things that we are not aware of until we get together and talk like this. Right?
You're right.
Yeah.
Many things happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like we have blinders
Right.
on,
Right. Yeah.
just doing our job. Yeah, interesting stuff. As far as your analysis of the Japanese Army, you know, the order of battle as you were putting it together, what was the most interesting, or some of the interesting things that you noted when you were analyzing?
Well, one thing is that as we have found with other intelligence information we've gotten from the Japanese, they can be very smart and they can be very dumb. You know, it's a funny way of putting it, but precisely when you really come down to it, there's so many things that the war situation could have turned, you know, completely, but they were pretty dumb in that sense that they didn't utilize the information they had to make it possible for them to be the victors. You know, in that sense, they're pretty dumb, you know.
Now, traditionally in the United States Army, Americans of Japanese ancestry at the time you were in
Yes.
were treated as less than. That they were looked down upon, they were in a segregated unit, and pretty much ignored or dismissed,
Yes.
you know,
yes.
that kind of thing. When you went to work for the British, how much of that prejudice?
Oh no, they respected us completely. And you see that? How can that be? And I question that because the psychology behind on this is so strange that, like for instance, here the bridge on the River Kwai comes in. I mean the British are so, you know, hidebound to their set of rules, okay? They cannot deviate from what they're doing. And this is precisely the situation here. Like they come in and they expect you to do certain things in a certain way, and it must be done that way, okay? And so when you look at the situation that I was in, I had to go by their rules, you know. So all these things, when you look at it from that perspective, then all these other things fall in line.
The British are famous for taking tea breaks.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Did you join them?
John, what?
Join the British for their tea breaks?
Oh, I mean, that's a ritual. Tea breaks. Yeah. When we were in first hit Burma, this must have been about 9:30 at night, you know. We're on this lorries, they call them the lorries, and that's of course in our terms weapons carriers. In other words, they carried the men and they carried other things, and all activities ceased. Bang! So what's going on? So what was going on? They all jumped out of their lorries and they use the word scrounge all the time, but they scrounge for fuel. In other words, they get they look for branches and all that thing, and they light up a fire, and that was their tea time. And we learned fast that you don't deviate from that. Whether you're out in a front line, whether you're out in a back line, tea time was tea time. Believe it or not.
One more question about analysis of the data that you were getting.
Yes.
You talked about having that officer. Oftentimes when POWs were captured, or when Japanese soldiers were captured, became PWs, they would have personal belongings on them. Letters from home, pictures. One guy had to carry all the dog tags of all the others that had been killed in battle, so forth. All of that stuff. Was that stuff sent to you? Were you looking through it to get information as well?
Lots of it.
No kidding.
Lots of it. Too much.
Why too much?
I mean, you can have just so much of that stuff coming through, and you have to, analyze and make conclusions and everything else. And it's quite a lot to the word the British use, scrounge through. You have to look through that thing, and but that was our job, so we did it. That's all.
As you went through those belongings from the PWs, any particular item or letter or personal effect you remember?
Oh, for one thing, of course, when I said they were smart and they were stupid, but the Japanese soldier, without exception, all of them had wonderful training in the arts. You say, how come? Well, how come you bring arts in? I said, well, you take any diary of what we got, and without exception, those diaries had drawings and things like that you wouldn't believe that a soldier in the front line will be carrying with him, And that's what they were doing. They as they marched along or whatever they did, they kept on with their, So the remarkable thing about it is that many of these drawings, so to speak, turned out to be informational drawings, because we could more or less tell where this action took place. See?
By any chance, did you save any of those for yourself? Anything?
No. We, for one thing, we weren't allowed to save anything. No, sometimes I wonder why that was so, because it would have been very nice to have a few of those in our hands, in our archives, so to speak. Because it will be very interesting material to me. Eventually.
You ever come across any music? Had any soldier ever kept some music?
You know, that's the funny part about it. You're the first person who ever asked me that.
Is that a good thing or not good thing?
What's a good thing?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you find any?
No. Yeah.
That surprised you thinking about that?
Yeah. I mean, you brought it up right now at the being. What happened? You know? But it's one of the, like the drawings, that part of the equipment, so to speak. Whereas music was not part of the equipment.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of GIs, you know, there's a lot of famous songs and ditties that came out of World War II.
Yeah.
I'm very fond of ditties, so from our side, American side, and yet I would expect something similar with Japanese soldiers.
Yes.
Of course, not many of our soldiers carried around music, I suppose, either.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'm sorry.
You got 10.
Oh, okay. Tell you what, do you want to stop? We have 10 minutes left with you, and then we have to
Yeah.
scram.
So
Yeah.
this is the reason why, when you look at right now, when you and I look at the movie Iwo Jima, from a Japanese point of view, the Ken Watanabe's, you know,
Hirabayashi.
you can understand the perspective that movie was made, and I thought they did pretty good job in that sense, you know. Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up real shortly, so I wanted to ask some broader questions.
Sure.
Kind of perspective
Yes.
stuff. Here you are, 90 years later, sitting here chatting about old times, old stories. When you look back to those times and you think about Hawaii Boy and Katong, you know, their contribution to the United States during that time. I know they contributed during the war. You know, the 10442 boys fought in Europe. You guys contributed to war effort. Beyond contributing to fighting the war, what did Americans of Japanese ancestry contribute to the country because they went ahead and helped fight the war? Was there something bigger going on?
Well, that's a tough question, really, because you have to look at it from the point of view of whether you're looking at it from the Hawaii perspective, whether you're looking at it from a mainland Washingtonian perspective. You know, that book, for instance, that was written and became a book, and at that time it was very popular, but it sort of faded away today. I mean, and yet to me, these novel type of reporting is almost as important to bring the whole core of what happened during World War II, you know, because well, this is the only way we can really understand what kind of problems the Nisei had up there and down here, you know. So, yeah.
With looking back, Hawaii boys who went off and fought for America. What do you want future generations to remember most about Nisei in Hawaii, or Hawaii boys who fought? What's the most important thing to remember about you guys?
You know, when you come down to how I feel about that is that the important thing is for today's generation to remember is that the sacrifices that their parents did cannot be comprehended unless you understand what made them do what they did. I mean, it's I tell my son, for instance, you know, no matter how often we talk about the values that you people have gained from what your parents went through, I tell them that you people really will have a tough time in putting all those values together and making some real, giving him some real understanding of what led to the whole thing of the sacrifices that your parents, your uncles, and you know, and brothers did. I said, but you've got to at some time or another face the fact that these are the values that unless you understand what they represent, you cannot truly understand this picture of the importance of the contributions of the relatives of uncles and and all these people that contributed to your lives. And I think slowly he understands. I mean, even through the movies that what the I've even forgotten the name of the movie, but
the Iwo Jima movie?
Huh?
Letters Home from Iwo Jima?
No, not that. This later one that this what's his name made this guy from Hawaii actor. He was I got it someplace.
A Lane Nishikawa movie?
Huh?
Was it Lane Nishikawa movie? I'll tell you what, forget the name of the movie. What's your point? Because you were heading toward a really good point about values and trying to understand values.
Yeah.
And your son, you talk with your son about this, and you're saying it's really hard for generation today to understand what we went through, the sacrifices we made, until they understand our values.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that you talking about your values like you have today, you think that helps the later generations understand?
Oh, yes. I think, yeah, they realize that, like the efforts that you people are making on this thing, eventually is ends up by being contributing to their own enrichment of what they should know about their history, you see.
And you and other Hawaii boys and other Nisei who step forward
Yeah.
and are generous enough to talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think there's value in that? In you guys talking, telling us?
Right.
I mean, all right.
Okay, we were talking about understanding sacrifices of your generation, and Nisei in particular, Hawaii boy in particular, Katonk, all the Americans of Japanese ancestry. To understand the sacrifice, we have to understand the values. To understand the values, that's a hard thing. You made a very good point. Then we were talking about you sitting here with us today and talking value, talking story. And I asked if you thought that would help my generation, people and younger understand.
Yes.
You say you thought it would. Why is that? Why is it important for Nisei to talk?
Well, there's no other way to do it. No, really. I mean, as those the Hawaiians would say, hey, brah, talk story, yeah? Okay? And in their own language, I mean, that's precisely what it is. If you don't sit down and talk story, a lot of this just goes the way of the winds.
That's so amazing to me because I talk with people, they read things in books, and they say, oh yeah, I know. And then I look at them and I say, I've been listening to Nisei for a long, long time. And this is what I've learned from them. And there's a whole different feeling. You could read it in a book, but until you experience.
Yes,
Yeah. That's a human being.
precisely.
Yeah. So that's what you do. Great. Let's see. Anything else you want to? Do we have a bit longer? Okay. So you go to war. You work with the British. You come home. And what is life like for you when you come home?
Well, what it was like was getting back in the old groove.
Is that hard to do?
Not really. You accept what is what you have to do, and you have to do it. Like for instance, when I say that, eventually, our interrupted romance and stuff like that, they have to continue, right? You cannot say, okay, stop, chop, throw it out. You can't do that. I mean, they continue. And some of the boys, find that things work out for them, and some of them don't. And they have to take these things in their stride, the way the coin flips,
How'd the coin flip for you?
Oh, me? Well, I have no regrets in that sense, Otherwise, I won't be here.
So after the war, you go to reassemble your life that you had before the war.
Absolutely.
And that was that life where you were on Hilo and Maui and you were teaching and working music.
Yeah.
How easily were you able to pick up that job again to continue on?
Well, since this is a continuation or something like that, how easy was it? I mean, let nature takes its course, right? That's how easy it was.
Did you get a job right away, or did you have to
No,
wait a while?
I got my job back. Yeah.
Fantastic.
You see, we were promised when we went in that when we returned, we would be able to come back to our old jobs. Yeah. And in that sense, we were lucky. Because a lot of boys, they came back and they found they couldn't latch on to what they left. And they found themselves in a sort of a sad position, I would say. Many of them wanted to continue doing what they did, but they couldn't do it because there was no job. And those are all the facts of life, right? So, yeah, and when I look back to those days, I really felt for those boys that couldn't join the link, from the old to the new. It wasn't one flow, It's they tried, and so unfortunately, as human beings do, many of them fell along the way, and those are what we call casualties of war.
Even though war had stopped.
Right.
Wow. Soon after the war, Hawaii, which had been technically a territory, had become a state, the 50th state in the Union. Mm-hmm. Where were you, and how did you hear that it had become official?
Where was I? 50th state. All I can remember is that when the newspapers came out, Hawaii, 50th state and all that, most of us here in Hawaii said it's about time. No, really, we did. It's about time. Mm-hmm. And I think that one statement alone, a lot of the young people don't understand the significance of that statement. It's about time.
What does it mean?
Well, it means that, up to then we were always trying to prove our position as citizens of Hawaii. But here, we didn't have to prove anything anymore. We were shall we say, fully accepted.
They were talking Americans of Japanese ancestry accepted in Hawaii? Or are you talking...
the entire state, the islands,
Oh, the whole island's accepted into the Union.
Yeah.
No kidding. So Hawaii, your thinking is that Hawaiians felt like they had to prove themselves to the mainland? Or to the Union, to the federal government?
Well, there was a good, doing the reason why we went in and volunteered and everything else was to do just that. Okay? And prior to that, remember that the boys of the 100th and all, they were drafted, you know. They're not volunteers. Yeah. There's a distinction there. And for the boys in the 100, I think the full meaning of statehood for Hawaii is one of these periods in one's life that you don't measure what it's like to be in that particular situation. Nothing can explain it except if you are 100, you know, or one of these draftee statehood boys. Yeah, nobody can take that away from them. Yeah.
I do feel what you're saying. It's about time, because I hadn't really thought about Hawaii boys joining the 10442 as part of trying to get statehood. I always thought about it as loyalty issue.
Yeah.
But to get statehood, and then that many years after the war, you had to wait. It's about time.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Yeah. So, had you married before the war, or did you marry after the war?
That's after the war.
How did you meet your wife? I like romantic stories. I can't help it.
Well, this is a real romantic story.
Oh, good. Good.
Well, you know, when we volunteered, most of the boys that volunteered, I say most of them now because I think they were, I would say, I wouldn't say most, without exception, every person went through perhaps what I did. We were accepted as volunteers. We were put on a army truck, and then we were driven down to the pier and put on this old cattle boat, really a cattle boat. Yeah. And that was our trip to Honolulu. You know, as a volunteer. Yeah, we shipped over, went to Schofield, and went through all the rigmarole of being outfitted with proper uniform and all that. And in my case, this was a kind of personal disaster because there wasn't a stitch of clothing that they could find that I could get into. Everything was too short, too long, too big. You know, it was really for the cartoons, as someone said. And I came, and see, my folks were here on Oahu. So what happened was my mother rounded up her very close friend, and the two of the women uh, yeah, this tore the uniform apart. In other words, they stripped the whole uniform and they redid the whole thing, the two women. And they made my uniform livable. You know, I could get into. And thus were born the pictures of that still exist, incidentally, like Toshi Anzai, which his name comes up as an old timer. He was a he and a person by the name of myself. Well, anyway, these two men were the oldest volunteers from Maui, and they. So I was able to join the corps of people with proper uniform, you know. And so we have pictures of those days.
So how did you meet your wife?
Well, when we were shipped out of here from Maui, Millie was working at as a she was I suppose her job as a secretary or something to this person who worked for well, honey? Hey, Sarah?
You don't have to mention that.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't have to say who she worked for. So she was working as a secretary.
Yeah. And then her boss, you know, he liked Millie very much, so when the ship was going to ship out, he told her that you better go see this boyfriend. She had no intention of having me as her boyfriend, you know. And so she saw the ship off. And I saw her there, and I said, well, if she is interested enough in me to come out to see me, you know, there must be something to it, you know? And that's how it began.
That's very sweet. I like that. And you have how many children?
Two.
2 kids. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Grandkids. Do you have grandkids?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Let's see. A lot of times we ask now, we're at the end of the interview, so we ask about your hopes for the future. What is it that you hope for our country and for your kids and your grandkids? What do you want most for them? All of that.
All of that. Well, my hope is that our country will learn from all these things that we should have by now learned from, and we'll be able to pass on that legacy that we have, you know, been able to hopefully hopefully, excuse me, hopefully, actually, we have tried to preserve for them, you know. Because I use the word try to because unless I do, we go on the assumption that nothing is guaranteed in this world of ours, right? Yeah.
That's very true. Well, I want to thank you so much for inviting us in, and I hope we didn't tire you out too much, and I hope that your life is full of the most wonderful music always, and never a flat note where it shouldn't be.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.